Hi guys, Gnembon here and welcome back to my survival world. We are still in 1.12, but today we'll start some preparations for the future upgrade. It's not gonna happen now. I'm not planning to upgrade to any future versions just yet. There's plenty of projects I'm working on that do not require anything higher, and 1.12 is so far the best performing one of all the current versions. But I did upgrade the texture pack to the new Jasper's textures. Mojang ships those with 1.13, but I made my own downgrade script from a reversed upgrade script that I found somewhere on Curse. And I think those new textures look pretty good. So since we had just the festive season behind us, I thought we could have my mobswitch in the overworld fixed a little bit and make it ready for upcoming versions. The thing is, the permanent chunk loading is gone in 1.13.1, so you cannot really do a permaloader based mobswitch. The dimension loading, the nether and the end are gone in 1.13 as well. The chunk loading in general is not useful and not usable in 1.14, so that's a no-go. Currently we have a mobswitch that's based on skeletons sitting somewhere in some lazy chunks far away from here and not despawning. So this part doesn't seem to gonna change. With the new spawn chunks that we're getting in 1.14, it might actually be easier to make a near spawn hostile mobswitch. However, this can change at any time. Lazy chunks are an unwanted child in the eyes of the developers for a very long time, so it's much safer to use mobs that don't despawn instead. So the obvious case is to use shulkers, but for that you need to wrangle them and bring them from the end somehow. Obviously I'm not playing here on single player per se, but on a server, so if two players, for example, it's very easy to get peace in the world, because mobs are all shared. So if just one player sits in AFKs next to the spawner, that will prevent spawning for all the other mobs and the other player can do its job. I'll actually show a simple example of this, how it can be done with an end and end switch, but this doesn't cover all the bases and will not work in general cases like the single player stuff. So, as I said, the current switch was made before even I started working on the permaloading technology that works, I think, from 1.9 to 1.12. So it's not working 100% of the time. And that's what actually I thought at the beginning when I was doing it. I thought when I load more than 100 chunks, we should be all good. But in this case, it turns out that our skeleton chunk is like in the middle of that list. So unless there is some other chunk loading happening in the world, which will increase this number, we might be getting some odd spawns from time to time. So how bad it is, we can actually measure it up. And for that, we'll head to our pretty much the only proper empty perimeter, the first witch farm. So we are here pillaring up above absolutely everything, making sure that there is not too many spawning spaces around us. But there are no mobs spawning anyways, because we have the mob switch running and all the skeletons here, 660 something, yeah, are still present. However, this doesn't happen all the time, and every 45 seconds we have an autosave and those skeletons are unloaded, and before they come back we have a little bit of spawning. So we could technically measure it with vanilla that ships with Mojang by, for example, measuring an output of a farm. If we know that it doesn't touch the mob cap like the witch farm or a basic hostile mob farm, we can use it to measure how well it performs and how well our mob switch is performing. But here we have a better vanilla and we can measure it exactly using spawn tracking. So for that we need to start the tracking and we need to wait 45 seconds, so exactly one cycle, making sure that we capture this moment that we have the spawning in. And 45 seconds on the timer. And we get 97.5% full mob caps, which means that our mob switch was effective 97.5% of the time and 2.5% of the time wasn't doing its job. Which means that it takes about 20 to 23 ticks for the skeletons to load in. The second reason for the work for today and where we are going to locate this mob switch is due to the fact that I don't like where our current spawn chunks are located. For multiple reasons. First of all, it's not the original location of the spawn chunks. I moved it here at the beginning when I started playing. I didn't know what even the spawn chunks are for, and I then didn't consider it cheating. I thought this is just a normal thing, you just want to be in a different location, set your spawn chunks. But now I think this is a little bit cheating. The second reason is we have here our house with all the basic storage, extra storage, basic farms, villagers, iron farms, and it's just too much. Wherever I go in this world, wherever I am at, having this keep running which will lag the game unnecessarily. Also, like all those iron farms here are all blocked, because I have so much iron, I have nothing to do with it, and they are just too much. I just have it pumping 24/7 for months. It's like too much iron, I just have to lock them in. So I could move everything out of this area and make a home somewhere else, but I thought the most fair way to do it would be actually to reverse the spawn chunks where they should be at the first place. So let's go there. So this is my horse area, horse track, and here we are going into the, I like this amplified terrain a lot. On the left is this demilitarized zone for the mobswitch, so I shouldn't get into that area because this may cause the skeletons to be entity processing and despawn. So that's a no-go zone. And here we're closing in to our old spawn chunks, so where they originally should be, which I marked them over here. In general, it's nicely located in terms of like the desert biome. It's all fine and good for various reasons. Then we have a little grove here, and that's where we're gonna locate our mobswitch. But ladies and gentlemen, before we get into more survival stuff, we need to take our Shulker Creative PhD class. P is for professional, because we may get a few bucks off of YouTube if it doesn't demonetize it. Yeah, that's how we define professional. And then HD stands for high definition, because you have our 64x creative textures. Yay, so welcome to the Shulker PhD class. So the basic idea behind mob switches is to accumulate certain number of mobs, which is 70 for hostiles, for a single player. That will make the game think that he has enough of those mobs, he doesn't need to spawn any more of them anywhere else in the world. And you could use any mobs, for example skeletons, but the problem with skeletons is if you get far away from them, they despawn. We've previously mitigated these issues with lazy chunks and chunk loading, but it's still all funky in 1.14 might not work, so I wouldn't rely on it right now. So it's much safer to use mobs that don't despawn. For example, you can use withers. Rayworks shown a relatively safe setup with withers that you can use, but you know, entities in this game, it's never too safe to assume that's gonna be all okay. Plus withers have very complex AI, shoot a lot of skulls, it's just one hot mess. So our best choice, I think, would be to use shulkers or end golems. The only problem with them is they are limited and you have to wrangle them from the end. So shulkers are funny mobs because they are stationary. I mean, we can move them by boats, minecarts, we can move them through portals and push them with pistons, but by themselves they only move via teleportation. They have a chance to do it when they are harmed, but they always do it when they are in an invalid location. And when they decide to teleport, they can teleport up to 8 blocks away in all directions. For teleportation to occur, we have to think about the valid locations for shulkers to be. And there are two different valid locations that they recognize. Valid location for them to stay and valid location for them to teleport to. And they are a little bit different. A valid location for a shulker to stay is an air block. It has to be an air block that has some block that has a solid top surface attached to it on any of its sides, even like at the bottom, which is a little bit weird. And one more condition is you cannot have any solid blocks above their heads, so they can open fully. We can cram as many shulkers in one place, it still doesn't invalidate the comfortable position to stay. However, a valid location for them to teleport to is a little bit different, so if you manage to put a solid block here, that invalidates their position to stay, which means that we force them to teleport. And all of these locations here are valid locations to teleport to because they have a solid top surface block on one side and then the air block, but they don't check for the conditions to open their head. So they'll keep just teleporting across those blocks until they make it to the other end. So that's the main difference between valid location for them to teleport to and valid location for them to stay. Oh, a little bit difference. In 1.12 we had to have a solid block for them to stay rather than a solid top surface, so that's a little bit different. What makes a mob switch is the fact that we can turn it off and on. And for example here, by moving the shulker inside the loaded area, which is here marked by green, this will make the game recognize these mobs and stop the mob spawning somewhere else. But we can also move them away from this area, which will enable spawning in the rest of the world. There's a bunch of ways we can do it. The simplest way is just to move them in minecarts like here. We have such a mob switch on SciCraft, but it gets really bulky, especially if you want to keep them separately for the lag reasons. But we can do it in a more compact and more fun way when we rely on their teleportation. So here's the simple setup that we can use, which uses pistons that are rested against some non-solid blocks like glass, so shulkers can attach to the pistons, which have top solid surface apparently in 1.13 and 1.14, and then when we flick the lever it'll make them uncomfortable because we'll move piston heads inside their heads, which will force them to teleport to the other side. Like, this is not maybe the fastest way to do it, but they'll do it eventually, and the thing is, the more spaces we have, the faster they're gonna take us to move them all to the other side. Like in this case we have only 32 spaces because it's a small demo. You probably wanted to have something like 100 spaces for like 70 mobs for a mob switch, yeah? But this setup wouldn't work in 1.12 because in 1.12 they required solid blocks to be rested upon, and pistons are not solid as well as the glass, so you need to rest them, for example, against some solid blocks like this one. But that would mean that in 1.13 and above they'll have all the uncomfortable positions for them to stay, which makes this little funny situation where they cannot really decide where they want it to be. But we can do it some other way, like for example this is a very compact way to do it using water. So instead of invalidating them using pistons, we push water inside their position, which is not an air block, and that would make them to move. However, there is a problem with this one, is the fact that they may take a while to teleport and they may drown, and that's not what you want. And second of all, one of the features of this mob switch is the fact that we can very easily take them in and out. And to take them out, we'll be squeezing them out from both cells, which means that they'll definitely drown, and that's not the best idea either. So this solution here is the safest from the compatibility perspective, because we have definitely a layer of solid blocks, no doubt about it, and we'll be pushing some definitely non-solid blocks inside their heads with the sticky pistons, and that would work in all the versions, no questions asked. Now, as I mentioned, this setup allows for very easy to take them in and out of the entire cells using minecarts, and we can do it by squeezing both sides of the cells so that we make all of those locations invalid for them to teleport to. Just make a bunch of them available next to our rail system, and we can just pick them up with minecarts, and that's pretty much it. And on the other end, if you want to drop them off from somewhere else, we can just eject them with an activator rail, and then they will eventually find their place into our mob switch, no problem. And the thing in the middle is absolutely not necessary, I just thought we'll have some fun with them. One thing that will be heavily rely on while wrangling shulkers from the entities is the potion of invisibility. What invisibility does is reduces the detection range up to 90% of the mob's base value. So for certain mobs, like for example blazes, where the detection range is typically 48 blocks, that reduces it to about 5 blocks. But with shulkers it's 16, so it reduces to 1.6 blocks, which is almost nothing. So if we are invisible, we can get really close to shulkers up to 1 block, so without this purple zone, that's where we cannot be, but they won't be able to see us. One thing to note is the fact that the invisibility effect depends on the amount of armor, total armor points we have on us. So, for example, if we pop in some golden shoes or leather shoes which have only 1 point of armor, that reduces the invisibility to 80% of the base range, which means that we still have quite a bit of area that we can work with, but we can still put our shoes on and add some extra protection to it. We can have feather falling, depth strider. We can also wear elytra, which doesn't add an armor points, so it doesn't count. And we can, for example, wear other stuff like pumpkins on our heads if we want to. And even while wearing shoes, we'll be able to place and manipulate blocks around the shulker as well, so that might be an asset if you think about it. One misconception about invisibility potion is the fact that it reduces detection in all axes the same way, but that's not true. What happens is it only reduces the range in X and Z coordinates. In Y, so above and below, it stays the same. And that's intended, that's explicit in the game. If the shulker is below us, it doesn't really matter because we'll be walking on some sort of blocks, so they won't be able to see us through blocks anyways. But in end cities it's quite common that those shulkers, they hang around from the ceiling somewhere, and when we get too close below them, they will be able to see us and attack us. Something to keep in mind. There's one more thing we have to talk about, because we'll be moving shulkers across dimensions, is their bug with their positioning. Now Shulker manage their position with two parameters. First is their actual position, so stuff that is shared across all the mobs, and that's how the game treats them. And then the second is their attached block. This is their property that they use just by themselves. And the thing is, their attached block is for them is more important where they actually are, because that's how they teleport. They just change the attached block and just zip through to it. So when we push them through a portal, this teleports them by changing their actual position into the world spawn point. The problem is that their attached block, because that's managed by themselves, is left the same regardless of the dimension. And the thing is, because they are left in an uncomfortable position, that will make them attempt to teleport twice within the first tick that they are in that dimension. And if they are able to find a suitable spot, they will change their attached block and then they'll move to that location and spawn. However, if they don't manage to do it in the first tick, they recognize that their attached position is somewhere else and they'll zip right through it the next tick. And from them on, this is also another uncomfortable position. They'll essentially try to teleport somewhere within that same coordinates from the end. So pretty much the only simple and reliable way for us to exactly tell where they're gonna end up is to block all the teleport location at spawn so they don't teleport to spawn, and also block all the teleport location in their exact coordinates, which means that they'll end up moved exactly to the same block position in the overworld as they were in the end, which is typically around 0, where the end pillar is. Now the last bit of information that might be useful for us is how to grab them from the end cities, and that is actually really easy. You just need to place any rail really in one of those 4 locations around their place that they are resting, and they'll be picked up by the minecarts that's passing by. Now at first I thought it has to be a curved rail in one of those positions, but then I learned it's actually shulkers are fat enough and the minecarts are fat enough as well to be able to pick them up with any type of rail. So we are back in survival in our end portal room, and there's nothing fancy. The only fancy thing we have here is a sand generator. This is a manual one that I built, I think it was just after Panda showed his sand video. And I was like, why to complicate those things? You can just manually just drop the sand yourself. You can just automate the process a little bit, and that's what I did over here. Let's maybe go into spectator. Yeah, it's a very simple setup. We just place 3 blocks and then we will essentially be given 3 more blocks, so we can just keep placing. Let's pop into survival. And we just can keep dropping the sand into the portal, and whenever we run out of sand, we just go to the end, collect the end over there and go back, and that's pretty much it. I didn't make a video early about it. I thought this is a very cool setup and still think it's a very cool manual setup. It's not faster than wrecking up deserts, but in my opinion, wrecking the deserts in a world that you plan to play long time, it's a very bad idea, so I fully endorse it. We have here a water stream that regenerates every time we go through. Let's block it maybe for now. And here, if you block those 4 obsidian blocks, yeah, we can see that you have a hopper minecart that picks up all the extra blocks. The rate is 36,000 sand per hour, so pick up, so 4 hoppers, exactly what we have here. And that's it, we don't need to replace it, you just need to leave, and next time it's gonna regenerate anyways. The only drawback with this sand farm is the fact that we have to really go back and forth, but that's pretty much it, and it's manual. But I don't mind it. I think a little bit of work to get a little bit of sand is fine. At the bottom you can see a little chunk loading grid just to support it. It still works in 1.12. As I said, dimension loading doesn't work in 1.13 onwards, so that's the last time we'll be using it to single player. Again, it's an item duplication. In duplication, I think it's bad for the gameplay in general cases where they go beyond the intended behavior, but in my opinion it's justified in this case for sand, because destroying deserts is no fun, especially that Minecraft is a game that can last forever, but some features are not designed to last forever, like for example sand. And the second thing that I think is fine to duplicate is shulker shells. The abundance of shulker boxes adds another layer of gameplay not possible with intended game mechanics. And the only way to get lots of shulker boxes is to cheat them in. You can cheat them in, you can say, using creative mode, by changing loot tables, using, for example, shulker spawners. I've seen them being common on servers, or by pruning periodically the end dimension, which might be dangerous if you mess something up. But you might as well give it yourself, the shulker boxes, for free if you're doing it on creative anyways. Or you can go hardcore vanilla and either dupe the shells as items themselves, like I do here with hoppers, which is still available in 1.12, but you can also dupe the shulker boxes mobs themselves. It's the same old concept of sun duping shown by Sarnkhan and Panda, just applied to mobs, with a really good implementation shown last year by the guys on the Prototech server, Race, Zerox and others. And those are the vanilla ways of duping. It's still duping, but at least it's vanilla survival. To help us explore the end without us being bothered by the Enderman and without cheating in the transparent pumpkin texture on our faces, we can again be using vanilla survival methods of preventing Enderman from spawning by converting our Enderpearl farm into the mobswitch. So normally how this works is Endermen just pop in here by teleportation and dive here in the water, and they die from water damage. But what we can do, we can just block this water here so it doesn't flood completely. I put here slabs instead of solid blocks, so they cannot really jump up back into the waters. They cannot be pushed back in. And we can just spawn them in, run the farm, and then with the alter ego here in the middle, he'll keep them loaded and keep them around, which means that no Enderman could spawn anywhere else really. So that's gonna be great. A simple Enderman switch with just one extra player and an Enderman farm. So here in the end we don't have too much. We have a little Nexus project. This was inspired by Ethos Nexus, and the goal was to store a double chest of each item organized by their IDs. I know it's laughable right now. With shulker boxes, if you have them, you can fit them really in few chests. It's not really needed and should be removed at this point, especially if you want to do something with the end. In terms of the end portals, we have one that I've created here by killing the dragon in this location next to the entrance portal, so we have not that far away to go. But there's a little bit of a location problem with this one. So if you remember the rules I said about the bug of shulker teleportation, if we move them to the overworld, they're gonna spawn in overworld coordinates, which means that our exit portal is actually around this space here, around this really nice pond with some floating red sands, and I don't want to destroy it. And if we, for example, move to 0, 0, let's maybe go into spectator, 0, 0 is roughly in this location. So at this 62, Y62 level, it'll be way below the ground, so it wouldn't be any eyesore to really build somewhere around here. It will be all underground mostly and inconspicuous, and that's the way I like it. But for that we'll need to respawn and kill the dragon, which will put the exit end portal in the center of the island and at 0, 0. However, we have a little problem in this world. If you place the end crystal in this location here on bedrock, it should initiate the whole sequence. The problem is it doesn't work. And why? Because instead of beams generating a new portal, we have a message in the server chat that there's an exception. There's a problem with the game. So because it's 1.12 and we have full access to the code, I decoded what the problem is, and the problem, to make a short story long, is the fact that the game recognizes that we have an existing portal and want to use the existing portal for that. But on the other hand, the existing portal is not a valid location for a portal anyway, so it fails in both places, which means that it doesn't have a place to put a new portal in. Rather than just doing it 0, 0, it just fails. So the bad news is we won't be able to spawn a dragon in normal way. For that we can do two things. First of all, we can fix the game code and just apply the patch, run the dragon once, and then it should be all fine. But I can do it vanilla way with the existing code, because I know what's wrong with it. So the only thing we need to do is to invalidate this portal, and we can invalidate it by removing one of those bedrock blocks. And that's also an old trick shown by Panda back in the days. I mention his name a lot because that's all the end tech was born, really. So if you put an obsidian block over here with a piston, and then we have to remove the obsidian, otherwise it's gonna blow up. Just push it, and voila! We have removed one bedrock block, and hence invalidated the portal. So right now we should skip that error message. So it should all work when we place the end crystal. Yep, you can see we got the new dragon. So let's get some music rolling for that. That fight was really easy actually. It got much easier than I remember it in 1.8. In 1.8 I 3-shotted the dragon with 3 beds, but I tested it a little bit, and recently I think it's a little bit buffed, the dragon, in terms of like the explosion damage, so that's not gonna work. What happened to be really effective against the dragon was the thorn damage and empty bottles. The thing is, I filled the full inventory of empty bottles because I didn't expect to be fighting a dragon again in this world, so I focused on getting some dragon's breath. And the thing is, with the new dragon fight mechanics, dragon hits for about 1 heart and hits very rarely. The most attacks that it uses is the range attacks with the dragon's breath clouds. And you can easily combat those by just scooping them with empty bottles. So I was just chilling here in the middle. I just smacked him twice in the head once he was playing the sitting duck in the middle, once or twice. And then I was just collecting this dragon's breath. I now have a couple stacks of them. And it eventually died from hitting me with thorns. That's kind of laughable, really. I'm not impressed by this dragon. So that will be it for now. In the next part we will test our strategy to get the shulkers back and build the mob switch, and hopefully it will all go to plan. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave me a like, subscribe if you are new, and stay tuned for the part 2 of our shulker expedition. So see you in the next one, bye bye!